And let's see, it's 8:01. Somebody wake me up. It's 8 it's 8:01 and we're at the intersection this morning. It's so good to see everybody here and to talk about this important work that we're all involved in. We're going to take just a few moments to let a few other people join us. And we already have Peter with us, so we're ready for our briefing. Um, so we're going to take a few announcements. People be thinking about what's coming up. But the big thing that's coming up, and we will put the link in chat momentarily, and just a hair away from begging all of you. I really hope that all of you or many of you can come to next week's roundtable. If you remember, Sacred has started a strategic plan this year to help community grow, but also to strengthen our capacity across San Antonio. So the intersection's a part of that. So we have these weekly intersections of information that are brief, that are recorded, that people can pick up and utilize in other ways, but we also get to know each other and network through those relationships. And then once a month, we meet in person. On the odd number months, January, March, etc., we have a 3-hour in-person an action lab, content rich with panels, but also time for discussion and building action plans of your own. On the even number months, February, April, which we're in now,
That's
and
fine. I
next
watched it this morning.
Thursday, really might want to get those microphones on the participants. In the even number months, we meet in person, but it's 90 minutes and it's a round table. And so we're working like at a lab table together, sharing some action plans that we're involved in that can be with family or out in community, whatever that might be, on how to be about action, to break it down. And so last month we went over, Antonio helped us with an overview of action plans, about 5 steps, very basic steps on building plans. It was amazing what we did together. Next week, a week from today, is the next roundtable. And it's going to follow up from the Action Lab last month in terms of intellectual and developmental disabilities, but it's more about the resourcing around support systems and how we create community, which then applies to anything that we're working on. And so that also kind of is somewhat of an introduction to what we're going to be doing today, because Peter's going to focus in on that resourcing within action plans. What it's really, I think, what we have found in terms of garnering community capacity is foundational to that. So the resourcing. So that's what we're going to be working on next week's roundtable. It's 3 to 4:30, and it's at MAC. Somebody help me there, because center. It's out by Megan's Wonderland. Am I
It's
getting any of
Morgan
that?
Morgan's
Thank you.
Wonderland Multi-Assistance
Alice, are you
Center.
with us, or somebody's on it? Right, great. So 3 to 4:30. We'll open the doors at 2:30, and we're going to be looking, specifically at resourcing. So again, I'm just a hair short of begging you to be there, but I think it allows us and gifts us with time to work on our own plans. So if you have teams that you work with, I'm not talking about teams online and virtual. If there is a group of people that you know that's working on something and could use just a little boost in it and a time together to work on that, this is the type of thing to bring them to, so that they have an hour and a half of some boost from information and people affirming what they're doing, but they have that time to look and tweak, where do they need to be doing resourcing with people, and and other types of resources to really boost the action plan that they're working on. So if it's not already there, we're going to put it in chat. Just show up 3 to 4:30 a week from today. Any other announcements at 8:06?
I have an announcement.
Yay!
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am a ambassador for Executive Book Review on April 15th at the University of Incarnate Word Christus Heritage Hall. We will be hosting Ron Nurnberg, our former mayor, because he is authoring a book in this new chapter of his life. And so it's from 5:30 to 7:30. I will put a screenshot in the chat of the announcement, and then you can go to ebrexecutivebookreview.com to sign up. It's completely free. Wine and cheese is provided, and it'll be, a small intimate group, and Ron Nuremberg will be our guest. We'd love to have you.
Sweet. Thanks, Kendra.
You're welcome.
Yay. So introduction to Peter, one short story of what happened following last week's At the Intersection. And this is what we're talking about today. So one of our regular participants who wasn't with us, able to be with us, hospital chaplain, university, had heard and saw in the notification that Melanie Grenz, who was with us last week from the University of Oregon, but the liaison to Texas, are you following all of this? She brought our briefing on trauma, brain injuries, and the work that the University of Oregon's been doing, but here in San Antonio, they've planted work with young people in particular. So that chaplain remembered reading that, contacted me and said, who is that person? And watched the recording from last week because they had a brain injury of a 20-year-old and they were trying to figure out some support systems and resourcing. So she watched the recording, she utilized the recording, she talked with Melanie, and they put some things into action with that family and other systems around them just in this last week. That is the power and the capacity of community. And I'm lobbing it to Peter because that's what he's going to be sharing with us today in his work. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. Well, I'm going to start with sharing my screen here. Let's see if we get a good view of this. Everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So today I'm going to be talking about the process, resourcing, and sourcing in creating a resiliency environment, an ecosystem that I've been privileged and with the relationships built to be a part of. And so I'm going to be a little personal to start here because this is the process for me, right? The process, how I start the day. And as soon as I wake up, and it's very difficult, but it takes discipline to do this, but to not allow other thoughts to come in. But right away, my first thoughts are to God. And my first meeting in the morning is with Him. So my first thoughts go to that. Go to Him, and I start acknowledging Him as a creator. So my first words of who He is, and I thank Him for the opportunity to start the day. Then I say about myself, what's my part in this relationship? I'm your workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, to do good works that you prepared in advance for me to do. And you make all grace abound to me and provide me with all sufficiency in abundance at all times for every good work. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So now I've established my relationship. Start the day with Him. I've acknowledged who I am in Him. And then what are we doing today? What are we creating today? Because He's a creator and He created us to be creators. And so that's how I start that personal relationship. Because today we're going to be talking about the process. That's my process. That's where I start. And then I go from there. So I placed this map because I wanted to because we talk about proximity, and then I know you've talked about this, that doing the work in proximity is critical to success. It's one of those three. And this one, I love maps. Something about maps. If you show me a map, you got my attention. And I'm a history buff as well. And I think I got a PhD in San Antonio because I just went deep dive into San Antonio. I was born and raised in the southwest part of San Antonio. Um, Here just south of Military Drive, right in this area here. And our church, New Life Christian Center, is up to the left corner here near Camargo Park, where this little triangle is, just north of Joint Base Lackland. And then, of course, this is the old Kelly Air Force Base. I wanted to share the relationships that got me to this place. These relationships are critical. And the process that I learned in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was working in the church diligently, working to advance community work for the church. And our church joined the South San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, which is now the South Texas Business Partnership. At that time, it was the South San Antonio Business Chamber of Commerce. Bob Sanchez was on the board there. And as a church, it was kind of like, what's a church doing on the chamber, right? What's your role in this? And Bob took me under his wing, and he was a contractor, and Kelly had just closed. It was closing, and he was a part of transitioning Kelly Air Force Base into what would then be Kelly USA. I'm sorry, yes, Kelly USA. And I got to shadow him as he was doing that. And he brought me under his wing. And then he was also working on Brook City Base at the same time, which was another project, but they were very different. But my heart was in Kelly because of our proximity and growing up there. And we were mourning because we lost Kelly. Everybody was like, oh, well, what are we going to do now? But Bob was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to link and we're going to leverage. And he taught me, he said, look, Peter, you're doing great work in the ministry, but I'm going to tell you, here's the secret sauce. It's linking and leveraging. And he was talking about projects, initiatives that you have in the ministry. How do you incorporate them into this master plan that others have already created? And he said, you find the master plan, then you plug into it. You get good at what you do, plug your part in, then link and leverage. And so I took that as a process for me and everything that I did from that point. But for today's purposes, and I think it's critical, and in this work week, it's progressive revelation, right? But it's about the relationships. That was the key relationship for me. He gave me so much confidence to be able to do this work. And he kind of walked me alongside and corrected me when I need to be corrected and put me on a good path. Great mentor for me to start this work. But what I learned about the linking and leverage related to this topic today is linking is the relationship, building relationships. The leverage is the collaborations that now not every relationship will you collaborate with. So you can link, but you may not leverage. And so for today's purposes, I'm going to walk through this as quick as I can in the time that I have to how we got here from those relationships. Because Dr. Adriana Rocha Garcia, I'm gonna fast forward to the relationship with her to move us into to how we got to the resiliency model. She was running for city council in 2019, and I hadn't met her, and I heard her on Texas Public Radio on a debate, and I said, "Wow, this lady is really sharp." And so I said, "I wish I could meet her before she becomes city councilwoman." And my son and I were going to go vote, and sure enough, there she is at the polls under a tree. And I said, "Hey, that's Rosa Garcia. Let's go talk to her. I want to meet her." So went over to her. She was there, very humble. And I said, "Hey, we just voted. I voted for you. I think you're the best candidate. Look forward to working with you." She goes, "Well, look, I'm here to serve, and I'm looking to work with people like you that are working in community because you're the ones that know what's going on. And I want to be the representative of people that know what's going on. So I'm going to be looking to get with you and see what we can do." Sure enough, within that week, we had uh, within that time, within that month or so, a couple of months, we had a meeting. We briefed, kind of, she knew what I was doing. And I was working on the SA Tomorrow Port San Antonio regional plan. That's why this map here is important because that Port San Antonio regional plan, this SA Tomorrow planning, I was involved in that. And I was telling her, "Hey, I'm working on this. I'm really deep into it. We're creating the plan for the whole of the port area." So she comes, right? And then this is where our connection happens, right? With you and I. Our relation is birthed from out of that meeting, we challenged her on homelessness, right? And one of our staffers really was really hard on what is the city doing? What is it doing? I feel bad. It's like, what are we doing, right? We're telling them what are they doing? What are we doing? So I felt convicted, but she said, "You know what? I don't have a good plan right now. We're going through the budget. This is my first year, but I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna let you know what the city is doing." So that was when we had our first homeless forum or town hall there at our church. And
Mhm.
Sacred and Ann, you came. I did the invocation, and Ann came up to me. I hadn't even got hardly off the stage. She goes, "Hey, I need you to connect with Bill Neely because we're doing something that's really great, and you need to be a part of it." I said, "Okay." And that was our first formal meeting, right? We had seen each other, I see, but that was when we connected, and here we are today. But that's one of those relationships that I have linked and I have leveraged, and it's been a divine appointment to get us here today. And so back to Adriana Garcia, we build a great relationship. She appoints me to the RAC, which is the CPS Rate Advisory Committee. And now that was an initial first time committee with CPS. So I went in, Storm Uri happens. I apply. That's that January. February, Storm Uri hits. CPS is turned upside down. And here I am coming into that to be advising on what we just thought was rates, but we ended up being like the advisory group to the whole process of how do we right side up CPS and the rate with the rate increases coming. And the first thing I did in the first meeting, I said, I'd like to make a proposal. And again, I had my meeting with the Lord in the morning, so I kind of knew where I was going with it. And I said, I'd like to propose, and here's another great relationship. Reed Williams, he was the chair. He was a councilman for years, great mentor as well. He took me under his wing for 2 years on the rack. Again, linked and I leveraged. And we worked together and I proposed at that first meeting. I said, I think we should consider a pilot in a underserved community where we could show what the impact will be of a rate increase in a underserved community, and then use that data in future rate increases so we can kind of prove that we're addressing that concern that yes, we have to have the increases, but how do we uh, make the resiliency in that community work that we can prove that keep investing in the CPS because we're working with the community and we have data coming back. So I put that on the table then. And of course, I was 2 years in. This is 2021. This is the year of 2021. I spent that year doing just that, building the Quintana community and preparing for that work. So I'm going to back up for another relationship coming out of this right here, which is the Southwest Community Area Plan. When I was working on the port plan did not include Quintana. And I was adamant about why not, that we're impacting them. We're talking about Kelly Parkway. And so they said, well, the best you can do is connect with them and bring them into the loop of what we're doing. I said, well, I'm going to do that. I connected with Andy Castillo, who was the president, who's now on the board of Port San Antonio, and he's also on the board of Southside First, the BDO for that area. Another divine appointment relationship, LinkedIn leverage. He and I were actually appointed to the RAC. He represented District 5, I represented District 4. So we started to work on preparing for this Southwest Community Plan, which was going to be 2 years later, 4 years later. Now we're in the middle of it. So we've actually started the Southwest Community Plan with SA tomorrow. But in that process, I continue to work on resiliency. And this is where EcoSA comes in. Reed Williams connects me to another relationship to Russell Steele. Russell Steele's on EcoSA, and he says, hey, we're doing this work. And I said, well, I've got this pilot that I'm trying to launch and I'm looking to expand it. And the environmental component is huge, right? Because of the bipartisan bill had brought all kinds of money was coming down and everybody was trying to position themselves. And I said, okay, CPS I'll help you pull some money down, but I'm looking for money for the underserved community, right? How do we direct it there? So I went to Doug Melnick, and this is where I met Kate Gisaldo, another divine appointment. She had just started that week. And Doug is talking about a resiliency model in communities that there's have across the country. He wants to incorporate it here in San Antonio. And Kate's there, just met her. And I'm with some other environmentalists, with Russell Steele, Didi Belmontes, and others, environmental leaders in our community. And I'm promoting Quintana. I say, hey, Quintana is a perfect place to create this model. And I said, so when are you going to launch it, Doug? And he said, I'm not. The community's going to launch it because it needs to be uh, organic. It has to come from the community. I said, okay, I'll be back. And I went and I started to promote this whole model to that community, to the Quintana community. And by that time, this 5 years in, I've already started to build great relationships there, and I've gained the trust of the community. I was born there, raised there. Recently, I moved back into the community, so I'm there working diligently with I'm now I feel I had to move back in. I said I can't be outside of the environment And that environment there, just to give a, looking at this map here, the toxicity in this part of the city is incredible. It because of all of the salvage yards, the recycling is one. Then you have the contamination that happened at Kelly that bled into that community right there. You see that red line, and it's very appropriate that it's a red line, but it's actually the railroad tracks that separate Kelly, what is now Port San Antonio, which is an economic engine of $9 billion to our economy, on one side of the tracks, while on the other side, you have an underserved community that is dealing with the environmental impacts of all that prosperity that's happening or that has happened or the misuse or the corruption, however you want to define it. But I'm not living there. I'm not living in what happened in the past. I acknowledge it, but what do we do to make it better now, moving forward, resiliency. And resiliency became very important after 9/11 because I found in working with the 9/11 Memorial Educational Initiative that in community preparedness, the most important thing is resiliency, how you can recover. And so, Anne, when we were at that first meeting at Dream Week, when we presented the resiliency model and we used Storm Uri as the model for uh, how do we learn from what happened during Storm Uri so that we can build this resilience into community? It struck me there that connectivity is the key. So connectivity, the linking and the leveraging of communities is going to be the key to resiliency. And so working with Office of Sustainability, we moved into the funding for what is a resiliency model. Let me see if I can move to the next slide here. I'm having trouble going to my next slide. What's going on? There we go. So this is the Quintana corridor. That line there is the actual corridor that is part of the revitalized SA Quintana Empowerment and Revitalization Project. So it runs from Quintana to New Laredo Highway. And that circle there is Athens Elementary, where, and I'll talk to this, I know I'm running out of time here, but I want to get to this relationship because it's
You're
kind of
just
goes
fine,
full
Peter.
circle. It's full
Keep doing what
circle
you're doing it.
to personal relationships that because I kept saying this whole time was so it's one thing to have community engagement, but you need a place. And I started to really promote the neighborhood place with Mary Gar and the work she was doing with family services. And I would use that
Mm.
as a model. And I shared it with Kate. She was one of the first people I said it to. I said, Kate, and Kate's a social worker by trade, right? But she came into this work in the environmental side. And she said, yeah, I know it well. And that's a great model. And so I said, I'd love to see that model at Athens Elementary because that school closed. And I started to advocate for that throughout the community as often as I could, and especially with Councilwoman Rocha Garcia. I kept saying, hey, I think it'd be a great place if we can build a consensus. Could you help me build consensus for that? And so we worked with the grant funding, and this is where we get into the REAST fund, which came from CPS to the city. I followed that money over to Doug Melnick's office. And Doug's, okay, we're preparing to prepare grants to go into community to impact with this REAST fund, which is about resiliency, energy efficiency, and sustainability. That's what it stands for, REAST. And Councilman Sandoval created it. I got my first grant there from that work for this work, which was we created a model project at our school. We did a retrofit of LED lighting at our school. And I took part of that money and I started to advocate for small businesses and nonprofits. And in that process, I met Deborah Ponce, who is doing also that Casa Verde CPS work, which I was, of course, working with CPS on. So we started partnering. How do we increase that impact of families going through the Casa Verde program, which is a weatherization program for underserved communities? So she's the environmental lead for our project now. And we have that partnership, another great relationship that we continue to work hand in glove. That grant allowed me to start the work. Then I joined the revitalized SA Corridor Leadership Program early last year and started the process of working through the next phase. But this phase here of working with those grants produced. This is the definition. Let me give this definition real quick. This is a definition that Laura Patino shared at our summit in November. Resiliency for our city focuses on San Antonio's capacity and connection with our social, economic, physical, and environmental systems to prepare for, respond to, recover from, adapt to, and thrive during shocks and stresses. That's the definition of resiliency for the city of San Antonio. We created with a group working with the Office of Sustainability, the South San Extreme Heat and Resiliency Corridor Plan or project. And this plan here uh, is a blueprint for the work that I'm currently doing on the environmental side, but then it also goes into the social side, and then it's got the economic side. So it's multifaceted in its presentation. So that year of 2024 this was being created. So I'm shadowing at that time uh, another divine appointment, which is Erica Benavides. She was the CEO or the executive director of St. Vincent de Paul. And she's also the owner of Cuba 1918, which is right there in the corridor. And she went into the Revitalized Essay program between all of 2024. So I shadowed her as she was doing the work so that when it opened up in the beginning of 2025, I joined in and just picked up on the work and we're continuing to work. So we've incorporated this plan into the economic development plan, which is and then these are some of the things that it came out of that plan. And I won't go through them all, but the weatherization and cooling programs that I had talked about. Oh, and part of that grant I got was to start a pilot. So because CPS hasn't done it yet, I said I'll start the pilot, and then you guys can catch up with us, when you're ready. And they're about ready now. Yes, and because I'm on the CIC. I'm on the CIC, which is the Community Input Committee for CPS. I'm the chair of the Power and Technology Working Group. So it's great to link and leverage the relationships and then the positions, being at the right tables to be able to move things forward for the community. So these are some of the things that were identified and that already started to happen in the community. With these are like the main points and community resiliency hub. So I'm going to close if I think I'm running out of time here, but
It's fine.
here's the timeline that from 24, 25, 26, and then now going into 27. This is from the Office of Resiliency and Sustainability that was presented at the summit and showing the work that was done with another great partner, which is Fuerza Unida, Petra Mata, Executive Director, great history of an organization that's been there for 40 years. They're the trusted agent. One thing that Doug told me, he said, well, you need to find a nonprofit in the community that's trusted that we can work with. And so Deborah Ponce and I went into community looking for that. And Deborah Ponce identified Fuerza Unida. Office of Sustainability came in, they contracted with them in 2024, and they started to build their capacity. And that's how this project was produced, this resiliency project through them. And it's been a great relationship. They became my sponsor even in the process of the Revitalized Essay grant that I just got. So we've continued to stay close as we develop the work with, I call it's really three different facets of resiliency. It's this environmental that we're talking here. Then you have the social, which is, I'm about to click my last click, but the economic, of course, with the Revitalized Essay. And you can see the timeline there. And some of the promotoras is what they're also providing now, which is getting in community. They're a trusted agent. So we're starting to build the capacity for them to do the CPS and we're working on the medical navigator part of it. And here's some of the solutions that came from that plan. I'll keep going. I'm sorry. This way. Okay. And then this is Ramiro Gonzalez. He's my consultant. He was the CEO of Prosper West and another divine appointment. I met him through the Impact Guild, and he's working closely with Impact Guild. A lot to say about him, but he and I are joined at the hip on this project, and it's been great. And that's a blueprint in the background there of his last presentation at our workshop in February. Center for Health Empowerment in South Texas. This is Dr. Ariana Rocha Garcia. When she left office, she became the CEO of this organization, which is dedicated to addressing the disparities in the southern sector of San Antonio and all of South Texas. But she chose to put her, and this is to create a health empowerment zone there in the Quintana area. And this is kind of the model for, I won't go into it, the communities at the center, and it's it's a beautiful work that now she's housed there. She's at Athens, and here full circle, right? I was promoting Athens as a resiliency center. Resiliency hubs are Office of Emergency Management, resiliency centers, and she calls them an empowerment center. So that's why our project is empowerment and resiliency. And it's not resiliency or a resiliency center, if you would, where when the disaster happens, it's resiliency 365. How do we support our community so they can come back from any disaster, any crisis that they intake? So she's bringing in all kinds of support. Of course, you can imagine the linking and the leverage she can do, and she's doing it. And I'm doing it with her. And our stakeholder group, we actually have now a formal stakeholder group coming out of our last meeting in February that is coordinating all this work. And we're moving toward the blueprint of formalizing that group, working with the city, of course, but with more than anything with community, being sure we represent there. And that's where we are today. Hope I didn't leave anything out that was of value, but I'm open to questions.
Well, what I want to do is open it to conversation, questions and conversation. I kind of put just into chat, I was following you, Peter, in terms of those key points, linking and leveraging relationships and resiliency, community and place and proximity. And anybody can be reading that right now. So these are the things that the main points that I heard from you. But I know there are others watching this, and Doug, I think, just even said, great presentation. So I really want to open this up as a community conversation. And what we all together this morning can see how this not only strengthens our community, but how might we also link and leverage moving forward. So one thought that was strongly going through my brain while you were talking, Peter, was finding others like you or knowing those in other geographies around the city. And so I was like making this like list in my head of people who are doing similar work in different ways. But what's so beautiful and necessary about this work is that it is geo-proximal. You know, it's a geography. And as our city grows larger and larger and larger in terms of geography, it's going to demand, frankly, this kind of work to keep us all knit together and providing a more compassionate world. How could we all learn from each other as well as link and leverage to move our different pieces of work, but with more focus? So I'm just thinking out loud right now, to tell you the truth. There is nothing behind that other than my brain's working. So other thoughts or questions?
OMG, I've had my hand up forever. The divine
Sorry.
appointment stuff has got me freaking out. I've been a little bit disengaged from civics for a while because I did have a fire that displaced me for like 2 months. And so I've just got into a home and I just got started back being engaged. And yesterday I saw that Amazon has put 3 bids in to do a data center on the west side of San Antonio. And I am on the county leadership team for Texas Organizing Project. And all this talk about how Peter is so energized about how raising energy prices can affect marginalized communities, and how SAWS is already trying to do rate hikes, and how we're already assessing that, how that will affect with the rising temperatures of our climate, how that would really detrimentally affect not only our water table, but our marginalized communities here in San Antonio. It's something that I went to our leadership at Texas Organizing Project that we really need to rally around. And we all really need to be aware of how horrible that will be for our community to have a data center built here. It will not give us any jobs. It will all be AI. And I would really, really like to connect with you, Peter, about some data on how that would actually affect us as a community. I feel like logging on this morning and hearing you speak so passionately about that and all of your credentials regarding energy and sustainability was definitely divine appointment. Thank you so much for being so educated about that. And I would love to connect with you later about this.
Yeah.
I would love to get in touch with you later. And I just really think it's a testament to how we all really need to be aware of how these things affect our entire community. And no matter what our position is in the community, we need to advocate for everybody else and how these decisions affect everybody else in our community and rally around that. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was absolutely amazing.
No, thank you, Kendra. I appreciate the kind words and your passion for that work as well. And yes, that is a major topic right now. We did get briefed on it in great detail, and so I did make comments at the last CIC meeting regarding it, and so there's some good things happening there, I think, to kind of alleviate some of it. But I think at its core, it's like we have to do our part in the community to build that resiliency in the community because we know those things we're going to advocate for them at that level, but yet, like I give you an example from this revitalized SA, we were able to get funding for sustainability for energy efficiency and biodiversity there in that community. And because of this work that we started, we linked and leveraged that funding, and the Rendon Entrepreneurial Center, which is there, they were awarded that grant. We're partnered together now, and we're actually awarding grants next on the 10th. Right now, we're reviewing the grants that came in from the corridor, the greater corridor, not just that one strip, but that it's the Quintana community, all the small businesses, nonprofits, and the project itself addressed 8 businesses and 2 nonprofits, and 4 of them applied for that grant, and so there was points for those that were part of the project, but it was open, and so we're going to be awarding that, and that's linking and leveraging access to resources. That was part of our goal with the project. And so it's really great to have that fruit. And so we're making those changes there on the ground. And I think that's where it's like Nehemiah, right? Nehemiah, when he started building the wall around Israel, he had the people build a wall in proximity to where they lived because they knew they'd have a passion to do it there. And that each one of us takes on that Nehemiah spirit of, work and pray and guard, protect. That's the model I follow. That's why I'm so focused on our community. Not that I don't, again, I'm for the big picture too. I really am. But I know where I live. But thank you,
But it
Kim.
makes me also think about like the executive book review. I'll take that since that was one of our, announcements this morning. Exciting announcement. But what if there were an executive book review? What if there were a dozen of them across the city? And there were a dozen different places who knew how to organize those, right? And brought people together. Um, it's somewhat like Bridges to Care under NAMI. What if there were proximal place groups of congregations working together in community in terms of mental health, which is what's already being worked on, right? Like, what if all of our more localized one effort was somehow replicated to be in multi places and operating, utilizing processes that we have found work well, and like the one you've described? Who then would we be, right? Who then would we be?
So,
Um,
Anne, that is something that Mark's goal is actually his goal by expanding like ambassadors. He's looking for different places around town to expand it and have it
awesome.
in different areas of town. So it's really funny that you said that because it's a discussion we just had.
Awesome. You see? And I'm so excited. So, in fact, at next week's roundtable, if people come, we could form just an intersection table, right? And be talking about how do we multiply these things and make those connections. So Kendra and Peter have just modeled that. So in terms of resiliency zones, to connect with Peter and get this information, utilize this recording, to help in future planning that's in other places of San Antonio. Might
One
be
area
good. In fact,
I
I'll
would say,
think about asking Mark to come and talk about the executive book review and how that process works and asking. Go ahead, Peter.
uh, related to that, replicating and the health empowerment zone that Dr. Adriana Rocha Garcia has begun working on and really building that in that area is to be able to replicate the health empowerment zones, right? So she's using that as her pilot area because that's her goal is to replicate it across the whole area, working with the health collaborative, which that report came out. And so that group of us as stakeholders is working with her as advisory on how engaging community and even working with Fuerza. That's where that overlap, right? The overlap of how there's a crossover of Fuerza was doing environmental work, but now because they're already engaged in community, it's easy for them to become navigators for the I'm sorry, for health and mental health, because mental health is part of health. So that work right there with the promotoras and uh, expanding that work in the community has two levels of impact. One on the environmental side that we're talking about with resiliency, but then also on the health side, and it's one and the same, but you've created that entity that's able to do that, and it's that whole resiliency center model within an organization and building the capacity of those nonprofits because that's the greatest challenge. As a matter of fact, here's another great testimony to this work here at the intersection. All hearts on deck, right? I was so impressed with that presentation. And I got with
Yeah.
Ryan, and yesterday we had our Zoom call with Ryan and Jane and with the president of Quintana, because they're presenting at Quintana on the 14th on how we promote the nonprofits in community and identifying them and support them. Back to that whole building capacity of those that are working in proximity with everything being what it is. So another testimony to at the intersection with the relationship building.
I want to thank you. It's
Yep.
8:43. Thanks everyone for coming, but Peter, amazing. And thank you for that presentation and just the power really of relationships, right? And I remember at Haven for Hope early on when all these organizations were coming together. And I don't know how they could talk about it now at Haven for Hope, and we were trying to explain to others what Haven was among all of the different organizations. And we've ended up using terms like the glue factor, kind of like what glues all together. And it was Haven's role to be that glue between the different organizations. And so, Peter, your model today and what you've talked about, you're the glue, right? Of linking and leveraging. But it's not just that, it's keeping those things linked and leveraged and moving together. I would suggest it's like, you know, it brings muscle, but it's like the nervous system or the blood
Mm.
flow in a
Yeah,
body, right?
yeah, yeah.
Moving that blood around. And um,
Mm.
so this is just as important. In fact, again, it's for those of us who do a lot of community work, we know it's foundational. And I'm mixing a whole lot of metaphors here, hoping you pick up on one. It's the Velcro.
Yeah.
It's the thing that makes it
Yeah.
stick.
Yeah.
It's traction. It's the wheels on the bus, right? We can do whatever metaphor works
Yeah.
for any of us. Use the metaphor, whatever makes it
Yeah.
work. But
But
it's
thank you.
really in the
And before we
relationships.
close, I just
Thank
want
you.
to acknowledge our ministry, New Life Christian Center. And I know Molly Lewis is on. She attends every meeting as well, like I do. And she's one of our directors with Helping Hands, our mental wellness program. And that we've embedded in the community as well. So we're doing the mental wellness part in collaboration with that whole medical movement. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the work that keeps me moving every day. I'm going to work here in a few moments, and I get to work with this great team of people that is the wind with beneath my wings on my pastor, Dr. Stella Arvan, and co-pastor Portia Brooks Vaughn. I am who I am because of them.
Oh, and we all are who we are because of all of us who are here. This is
Thank
what
you.
makes San
Peter, that was
Antonio.
great.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you next week at the intersection. Thanks again. Hope to see you next week at the roundtable. Look at your calendars. Bye, y'all.
Have a blessed weekend, San Antonio.
You too.
Bye-bye.